Alright, success. The engine is finally out of the car. Well, put the engine down on a little dolly for now. On the dolly, I will be removing the supercharger manifold, the wiring and starter, the rest of the wiring on all the way across, and I will be disconnecting the engine from the transmission and removing the midshaft. Once all of that's done, then I'll remove the clutch and flywheel, and I will place that motor on this engine stand. I will remove this engine block from this engine stand, and then I'll rip that engine apart, pull the pistons out, and take the pistons and the engine block to the machine shop so they can bore it out to the size of the pistons that I have in that engine. And that will be done tomorrow. For y'all, it'll be in a few minutes because it's a great day and I'm going to go out, hang out with my friends and my wife, and do some car stuff and go out to eat and stuff like that. But for now, we'll continue doing stuff later. Alright, I'm going to begin by removing the spark plug cover and removing the ignition coils. So this one didn't come out because it's stuck, so we're going to get it unstuck. Alright, and then I just go ahead, just impact and remove it, just like that. You can do it by hand, but it sucks. Next thing I'll be removing is the ignition coil. That socket's not deep enough. Okay, now I'm just going to pull and unplug the coil. And that's that part. Now we're going to go ahead and start removing all the wiring on this end. Alright, so the next things I'm going to take are the wire harness on this end. Some of these are fairly simple, some of these may fight. You see this one back here, it's a little hard to get because of the angle, so press and pry up slowly. There we go, just like that. Alright. This one, you have this little section, I don't know if you can see it, but you should be able to press there, slide out. So you're looking to get that out. Same thing with this one, undo it, and boom. Alright. Now I'm going to remove the harness by undoing the clips. Some of these clips you can get with a flat tip, sometimes you can use a needle nose. And a pick. Where's my pick? It's the pick I'll be using. So let's loosen the top first so it can start sliding out. There it goes, and then from the bottom, it's the pick. Push up. Try not to force. There we go. Try not to force it so it doesn't break. Some of these you should be able to twist to the point where you can grab it with a needle nose. Just like that. Okay, this one. Twist in the angle so you can push the legs in. You see it fighting, use the pick. I also want to collaborate, so let's just use a different angle. There we go. Alright, and now this whole section up here comes right out. Alright, moving over to this side. Some of these, as you saw earlier, were already undone, so we'll just continue undoing the plugs. This one has a retainer down here, so same thing. Grab your needle nose, undo it, and remove it. There we go. Alright, Now we have these bottom ones, so same thing with the clips. Now depending on how well maintained your engine is and your harness, it depends how these will come out. If your engine is dry, abandoned type, a lot of these won't come out, and they might break. If they break, you can always sit tight them. Alright, so most of this harness already undone, so all you gotta do is undo this clip right here. It's just like the one on the firewall. You pull towards you and then slide it out, and it's completely off, and that takes care of your ECU to engine harness. Now next what we're doing is the charge harness after we remove the manifold. Alright, so to remove my manifold, you got the original spots where your factory manifold will bolt up, but on this manifold I also have a brace down here, which are these two bolts to just get it off, but eventually I'll remove the whole assembly, but I'm just going to concentrate on these two, and then I'll just pull the manifold out. Okay, so first I'm going to break loose all the hardware. That one I need a angle wrench, which I'll grab in a few. I'll grab that wrench. So to remove that, I'll be using a Allen wrench with the ball end, but the best way to take it off is to remove this out of the way, and in which I can, because it's only 3 bolts, but I'm just gonna do this first, and then I'll take this assembly off, because I don't know if I want to. Now, you know what, I'm not taking this off. I'm just gonna leave it there, because when I remove this, that will come with it. That way I'll keep all of that together. But when I assemble this, to get that torque right, because I torque all of these bolts to 20 foot-pounds, I'll remove this so I can put my torque wrench on it. But for now, we're just going to remove it with this. Alright, so since it is in there at an angle, I will be using this to assist. There we go. Now we can loosen it. Alright, with this particular water bypass, can you see? Yeah, you can see. Alright, just remove this bolt. I keep it there for show because this is bolted down to the system, so it doesn't come out. But yeah, it looks better with this on there than with that hole just being emptied. Alright, okay, so that's everything loose. I said did one because I want to take it out last. Now I will grab the manifold. And the manifold is out. Alright, so this is my thermal gasket. It is made specifically by Merck Racing to have a proper seal. That's what these O-rings are for. And to not transfer the heat from the engine to the manifold. Make sure not to lose your seals. Make sure all your seals are there because they can fall out. See, I'm missing one here, and it's because last time I did this I lost it. However, there's such a good gasket that even without the rubber seal, it will still seal properly. This is just to assist. These little O-rings, they're not, you don't need them, but I need to get one just to have, but I'm missing one. Alright, so now we're going to remove the charge harness. Most of it is already off, so what we're going to be focusing is in disconnecting the here, the 12 centimeter, and then our little knock sensor, which may break. I'm already prepared to buy a new one if that happens, but it is what it is. Here we go. First thing I will tackle is that knock sensor. Hopefully it should come out, let's see, without breaking. And winning. Alright, next will be the starter signal wire, and now our starter power wire. Now there's a wrench that I like to use on these because it fits perfect and I love it. If you don't have one, I suggest you get one, but these things. Alright, once it's loose, just finish taking it out. Yep, there you go. Always put the nut back. And now that clip. There we go, and our charge harness is out. Alright, next I'm going to do is remove the sensor itself, because I'm going to be removing the starter. And the last thing I want is to hit this by mistake and breaking this sensor, because it's very fragile. It just breaks if you look at it wrong. Alright, so do not, I repeat, do not use an impact on it. You will damage it. So we'll do this by hand. So if you notice, I love to use my impact tools, and it wasn't that tight. So all I did was break it free, and now I'm just removing it. And this will be placed somewhere where it will not get hurt. The next thing I'll be removing is going to be the water pump housing. It's going to come with the water pump, the tensioner, the thermostat, and this water crossover, which I will take that to a mill out as well. I'll take everything off as an assembly. So on these, I don't know how tight they may be. I'm going to try my impact first, but if it doesn't, we'll have to hit them by hand first. But they're a little tight, but they're loose. That one's not coming out. This one was a little tight. I'll roll for it. There we go. Alright. It took the yep, I didn't lube these, but you can tell that this one had got some moisture in there because it goes through all the way through to the back, and there's an empty slot in there. The moisture can get in, which I'll show you guys later. So the next thing I'm going to remove is the holder for my water bypass, and also over here got this little 10 mil that holds the bypass in place, and this hose, so I'll be removing that next. Now this is the hose I use to bleed the air out of my system. This particular clamp is worn out because on my trip back from Missouri, I kept on doing this to bleed the air out, because since the engine was cracked, I had to keep bleeding the air out of it so I can get some mileage. Alright, so that's loose. Forgot to mention, this lower hose right here also needs to come out. Yeah, you guys saw that whole assembly move. This O-ring does a pretty good job at holding. There's no need to over torque it, so that plays just fine. I mentioned before, so you don't lose your parts like a hose and you want to keep it there, just snug it. And now, there we go. This particular hose connection I lubed, and when I'm reassembling the new motor, I would explain what I use, because it doesn't damage rubber, and you don't want to use grease because it can make the hose get all soggy and expandy, and it'll be damaged. All right, now that all of that is loose, I'm gonna go ahead and remove the water pump housing. And what I'm going to do is break it free from the engine. It is siliconed on. Ah, forgot to remove one part, so let's go ahead and do that. Alright, this hose right here, I need to loosen up as well. So, keeping the hose with the pump, we're going to undo it from the oil cooler back here. I'm going to give it some play until it's loose. There we go. I'll move it. A little bit of antifreeze there. Give me. Alright. Cool. Alright. So now we're going to pry. So I'm going to pry right around here. It doesn't require much force, just to break the silicone free. You see it's already moving. There's no good spots to pry on this side. But now it's 100% free, so I'm going to pull the whole thing out as one assembly. Alright, here we go. Now the main reason I want to keep this as one assembly is because when I put on the new motor, I wanted to do just that, go on as one, because all of this has been sealed and lubed and all this stuff, and I don't want to undo and reseal all that stuff. Right? I will have to clean some of that, so you can see in there. That's from the oil and water mixing. And now we'll talk about the crack on the engine. Alright, when I noticed this engine was cracked was when I saw that right there. That's how you know that your engine block is just cracked. Alright, and this crack, even though it's external and it was leaking antifreeze out, it also cracks right along here, going across into this spot right in here. Alright, and if you notice, you know, this is like a oil, what do you call it, an oil water separator, like a factory built one, if you will. So this particular galley in here, with the PVC valve, its job is to separate the oil and let the oil drain back into the engine and suck in the you know, pressurizes, because the manifold, not the manifold, but the water pump housing has the other side of this cavity, and it's got the suction up here from the intake, and it's basically separating the oil from the gases in here, you know, to do its thing. So once it's cracked, you got water leaking out and water leaking in, and you're gonna have water going into your engine block right through that little hole. As you can see, I have coolant in there. So yeah, this poor engine, unfortunately, is too far gone. So you cannot fix this. You can weld here, but how you gonna weld that section in there? It's just impossible, unless you basically cut all this out, re-weld it, recover this, and then you have to worry about the cracks spreading in the future. It's just, unfortunately, it's just not worth it. It was a bad casting with the K20C3 and some others, not many, but mainly the K20C3. So now you guys see why I'm changing my poor rebuilt, new to me, new to my car engine. So we move on, continue to tear down. So the heat shields are 12s. And the mid shafts are 14s. That's that part. Next I'm going to do is disconnect the bolts from the transmission. So you have this one here, this one here, this one here, and on this end we have this one here, this one here, and that should be it because we removed the lower ones. Then I'll be able to separate the transmission from the engine and get the engine ready to go on the hoist. Well, I mean on the engine stand for further disassembly. And I'll also be removing this since I'm already here, and that's also 17. Alright, so we start with the ones in the back. Also on the top. And the one on the side. That should be all the transmission bolts. But last but not least, the supercharger support bracket. Okay, so right now the transmission is unbolted from the engine. What I'm going to do is hook up my engine lift to the engine block so I can support it, because when I remove the transmission it can fall off that cart. That cart is hollow on the bottom, and the last thing I want to do is drop the engine and cause damage to the head, because I will be reusing my head. So I'm going to set that up. Alright, so we're ready to lift the engine in preparation to install it into the engine stand. So what I've done is that I ran this strap to this area right here, and the front step is still on the front engine mount. Once I start lifting, I'll level it, because my goal is, the reason I have it set up this way is to allow me to slide that under once I install the engine adapter, which I got to take off for that engine block. Alright, so I'm going to start lifting it. Once it is off the ground, I'll remove the transmission, place it out of the way, bring the engine adapter, bolt it up, lift it to the correct height, and slide that over. Should be fairly simple. Alright, here we go. Pry bar. And the transmission is off. Now the clutch is a 12.10 mil. Pretty impressive that the Exceed Stage 1 can hold the power of the 1900. I mean, I have slipped it sometimes, but for the most part it's been holding. Next thing I will take off is the flywheel. It's a 17 12 point. Now to install the engine thing, I've got bolts that are long enough to hold the weight and not go too far in and crack my engine. Even though this engine is not worth saving anymore, I still want to maintain good practice. Now I installed the engine adapter to the engine block on the top section, not the bottom, because I will be removing the bottom to remove the crank. Just an FYI. Alright, now that the engine is lifted, You can get this out of the way. Bring the engine stand up to the engine. Slide it in. That's it. Here, higher. Now I just need to find the pin. Well, there it is. And the handle. Now, typically don't critique, but whoever didn't put this welded straight, it's a dumbass. Alright, there we go. And now we can lower it. And now we can continue with the teardown. Next item I'm going to be removing is going to be this mount. But in order to remove this mount, I need to remove the post mount from the engine front mount, because there's a bolt down here that I cannot get to with this on the way. If not, I would have just left it, but we're going to go ahead and take this one off. Now we have access to the 4 bolts for the front triangle mount. Now the next item I will be removing will be the crank pulley bolt. I got my way of doing it. I use my big impact with a crank pulley socket from Ingersoll Rand. It's pretty legit. It works every time. It has not failed yet. Let me just not jinx myself, but here we go. And it's out. Now whenever you remove your crank pulley, make sure that you do not lose your key. So I like to put my finger on it while I remove it, and make sure you do not lose this. Alright. Now that we're here, I'm going to remove the VTC solenoid and all the 10mm bolts to remove this front cover. Alright, so I'm just going to start here. Now the bottom one's different than the rest. It's your alignment pin for the front cover. These I like to keep in a Ziploc bag. And in this Ziploc bag I will also place my Woodruff key so I don't lose it. And the 3 lower ones. And in the baggie I will save the VTC solenoid. These can be troublesome to remove. One way that I do it is by, like I did first, by pulling it back, which typically comes out. But when it's stubborn, you can pry carefully, keeping pressure going that way, because this will push pressure that way, because you do not want to break that that section right there. So boom, it is out. Now since it is with the milky crud, I'm going to wipe it off first, and then I'm going to put it in this baggie for safekeeping. Alright, next I'll be undoing the valve cover so I can remove it, and then I'll pull the front cover off. So for the valve cover, it's just this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bolts, well, nuts with the grommets to seal it. Remove the dipstick, and then I'm going to leave all of this stuff connected, and I'm going to remove this as an assembly and put it to the side, and then I'll remove the front cover. Next I'll be removing the grommets. Sometimes they come right off, sometimes you have to pry them. Sometimes they separate. So to get the rest out, I'm just going to pry up on the valve cover. That's all of them, and now we get to find out if my valve train is rusty. We obviously got to clean all that crud out, like gravy. But fortunately, the cams, the lifters, and everything in here doesn't look rusty. I have been starting the engine at least every weekend since this happened to try to not let it just sit with the water and the oil, just basically flow and move all the components to prevent rust, and I guess it worked. So other than cleaning, it looks like we were lucky. Just a whole bunch of water mixed oil. Alright, next thing we'll be doing is remove the storm plate. However, because now this is more susceptible to rust and starting the elements, and it will be for a little bit, I'm just gonna grab me some PB Blaster and just spray it to protect it. Rather be safe than sorry. Because yeah, everything looks good in there. I'm surprised. I was expecting the cams to be rusty and so forth. It has to be, like I said, since February. We're currently mid-June. I'm happy. Alright, now we're removing the front cover. So obviously I already took all the bolts out, and we're just gonna break the seal on this. You always want to be careful because you never know if you forget a bolt, and if I just noticed I missed a bolt. Alright, there we go. That's what we're looking for. Alright. Same thing, fairly clean, just oily and coolant. Clean all those parts before reassembly. So upon inspection, everything seems to look good. I don't see no rust. All of this stuff was new when I had rebuilt the motor, except for the guides. But you know, the chains are good. The tensioner looks good. And for you guys, if you don't know, you measure the wear of your chain right here. From this point to this point, how far this is out tells you if your chain is worn. When I reassemble it, I will do the measurement to show you guys. But for now, everything here looks good. No issues. I should be able to reuse all of that with no problems. Alright, so now I'll move forward and undo the timing chain. Alright, so we'll start by removing the tensioner. I have an old tensioner retainer, just so I don't have to fight with it, because it's better be safe than sorry. So we'll start by removing. Honestly, that was a little too freaking loose. Interesting. I wonder if I torqued it last time I did this. The last time I took this apart, it was in a apartment complex because the head gasket had gone, and that's what caused my initial overheating problem. So I did what I had to do to get the car back home And I guess when I noticed that the engine was cracked, I didn't care about quality. I cared about putting it back together just to get home. So I missed torquing that because I've never had that loose like that before. Things happen when you are upset, I guess. So, reluctor wheel. Alright, let's start by loosening that chain guide. It's a little beat up in there, so I'll probably just order a new one of those. A lot of people are going to critique my impact use on the cam rocker assembly tie down bolts, but my engine, I do what I want. If it's the customers, I will do it by hand. That's my engine. I do what I want. Alright, chain is still great condition, still new. No stretch obviously, but yeah. This guy away. It should be all the timing components I need to take out. Now I'm going to release the cam assembly and remove it. Alright, to remove the cam and rocker assembly, you got 4 bolts in each cam tower. Do not worry about this one and so forth. The only ones after you remove all of those that you need to take out is these 2 10s right here, and then you'll be able to lift the whole thing as an assembly and place it safely somewhere else, and that's what I'll be doing. Alright, so I had a technical difficulty. The battery died, so what I did was I loosened all of these screws by hand, and then I used my impact to run them all the way out. So I started with these 2 10 mils because you don't want to forget those. If you pry this off, you can snap those very simply. So then I loosened all the hardware that holds this down. Then I use a flat tip right here, prying right here in this area up, and same thing right here to pry it up. And in the front, I inserted a flat tip right here, pry it up, and over here to pry up. Once everything was loose, I grabbed the entire assembly, pushing inward pushing on these can towers inward and pushing on this rear assembly inward. That way all the LMAs, the VTEC lifters and pins don't fly off, because when you put pressure on both ends, it'll maintain everything together and nothing will fly off. And then I placed it down here. I came to check the camera and it was dead, so I just changed the battery. So we continue. Sorry about that. Alright, next thing I'm going to be doing is removing the head studs to remove the head. I have Inline Pro head studs, so they require a 16 millimeter. However, it's supposed to be a deep well. This is all I have, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to put them in, and then I'm just going to put the this pry bar in here to where I can just get it far enough to grab it, and then I'm going to loosen it. When you turn in these, you'll feel a spot where it just lets go. That's when you know they're loose. I'm going to work my way from outside in. Looks like my socket is long enough to do this job. And a workout on this one. Now I'll remove them the rest of the way. Take the impact. Now they do have washers, so you gotta be careful. Some stick, some don't. So far both have stuck. Like that one didn't come out. Alright, that's all of them. Now I gotta grab the washers. But what I'm going to do is remove the studs. See if I have it here. Yep. Whenever you install these studs, you want to make sure that there's no fluid down down the hole. It can cause damage. Right now, since there's fluid from time, it tends to go downward into it, creating a suction, which makes it hard to remove these sometimes. Like I said, what makes these hard coming out is the suction that it creates in there. So even though the impact was doing its thing, I wasn't really banging into it. You can see the crud that went down into them. Now we can get the washers that didn't come out. Alright, so now I can lift the head off. But what I did over here was, to make sure I got everything out, I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Gonna dry these out, put them in the baggie, and put them away for now. Alright, now I'll be removing the head of the engine and tipping it on top of that drip pan to try to get all of this milk out, and then I'll secure it with the rest of the other stuff. On my rebuild from going to Missouri back home, my son got me this head gasket from, it's a Velcro. I was actually pretty surprised of the quality of this gasket. To me, it looked better than the Honda one, and I'll explain why in a second. So this particular gasket now is crushed, but it had these channels all the way around the cylinder, and you know, to me that promotes a better seal, especially with my higher boost. So thinking about finding this same head gasket and using it, because I mean, you can see where I have a spot right there that let me see, it doesn't look like a blow through, it looks more like a crush of the blue rubber material right here, and that would be where on my number one cylinder towards the rear. And I mean, this engine block's not going to matter, so I'll inspect the head later. But yeah, thinking about reusing Velcro. People might not like it, but I'm going to do it. The material just seemed better. Other than that, pistons seem okay. Got a carbon buildup, so I know that I wasn't getting water into the cylinders. It was all being passed through the cracks. So, such a shame. Now I gotta take these pistons out and that engine to the machine shop in order to get the bore corrected, because those are 0.5 over, and then that engine can be put back together, the other one, the spare one. So once I finish draining this, I'll start and drain the motor. Once I drain the motor, I'll remove the oil pan and the oil pump, the crank, and the pistons, and then I'll be ready. So tomorrow I can go to machine shop and hopefully I can get a quick turnaround to get that engine back and reassemble as soon as possible. Alright, here we go, continuing on, next day. So the next steps that I'm going to take is that I'm going to remove the lower AC bracket, the lower rear engine mount, and the oil cooler with the heat shield, obviously the oil pressure sensor, and then I will remove these two studs. Alright, once I do that, then I'll flip it upside down, remove the oil pan, and start releasing everything so I can take the crank out and finally get to the pistons. I did a quick scrub on the pistons, and I don't know if you can tell and or see the hash marks on the cylinders are still perfect because it was a good motor, except for the crack. So either way, let's get it on. Alright, so I'm going to start by removing these two studs. I'm going to use ratchet wrench, so make sure that it's going to unscrew it. Put that in first, and I'll put the nut, and then I'm going to put another one to lock it in place. Then you're going to tighten them down, and then there we go. Once it starts moving, you just remove it. Alright, something that I noticed but I didn't stop was that these nuts they have locking teeth, and now I have to fight to remove it. I'll be able to remove it, but make sure that you don't use locking nuts because they're going to be a pain to remove. Now I gotta fight with this and then get back to the other bolt. Alright, besides the fact that these, like I mentioned, have those locking curbs, I'm still going to keep going with it because I don't feel like looking for another nut. So once again, make sure it's on the loosening Put your nut in there. Put your locking nut in place. Lock it down. There we go. Like I said, using nuts that got locking teeth is not preferred, but I just want to get this done. I gotta get a machine shop. Right, now to loosen it, just gotta fight with it a little bit. These nuts are for exhaust systems, so they don't back out, but that's what I had available and I used it. Now, like I mentioned, the lower AC bracket. Here we go. Now, heat shield. Next is the lower rear mount. Alright, next thing I'm removing is the oil cooler. There's a nut here, a screw here for the cooler line bracket. Well, not bracket, but hose, or elbow, however you want to call it. I have a 10 mil on mine, but typically it's an 8 mil. There we go. And for that right there, I have a 30 millimeter. Alright, we're going to let this drain out. And save this. Don't lose it, don't damage it. Next we're removing is the sensor. Alright, I'm going to use an adjustable wrench because sometimes the socket won't fit right because of this assembly right here. You can break this, so I'm going to use a wrench. Now be mindful that this is a 1/8 NPT, and if you over tighten this when installing it, you will crack this because as it goes in, it spreads out. And to install it, you do a little Honda bond and it will seal. You don't need much, but it's out. Alright, now we're removing the oil pan. So I already took the 3 out to remove the front cover. We're going to do this right here. There's 2 right here, 1 in there, and all of these out here. Alright, so that's what we're doing next. Alright, quick thing to note, this is not a OEM Honda oil pan. It was, because it went up in price, it was a $45 eBay special. Some people hate on eBay, but eBay don't make parts, eBay sells stuff. And I didn't want to spend that much money on a new oil pan, so I got this cheap one, and after running it pretty hard, not just on this engine, on the previous engine that I had in that car, there's nothing wrong with it. So all of y'all freaking too stubborn to get a non-OEM oil pan, want to pay the $200+, that's on you. I do have OEM oil pans, but I wanted to try it out, and it took the torque from the car and everything. It's a good oil pan. Alright, on to removing. Alright, the pin is in. I'm gonna go ahead and start prying this up. Ooh, let me just make sure I didn't miss a screw, because that is tight. I tell you guys, Honda bond is no joke. Alright, let's start up here. There we go. There we go. Alright. There we go. And the oil pan's out. So I just gotta clean it up, but it's not too bad. Alright, next we're removing the oil pan. To remove the oil pan, you got these two 14 bolts, these two 12s, and then, I mean, I can pry it and take it out, but then we're gonna remove, we'll take this out, and we'll take this out, take the chain out of the way, and then we'll just lift the pump out. Okay, now the tensioner. Alright, technically you're supposed to take this out. I'll just take it out. I just gotta remember once I install this to torque that bolt, because if not it will back out, it'll push out through the oil pan. Alright, oil pan is disconnected. Now we'll pry it off. Alright, loose. Alright, reason you pry up because there's some dowel pins in there. We need to remove, get them out, but they're still okay. I mean, oil pump. Alright, next thing to remove is going to be the I don't know how you call those, windish tray retainer or whatever, but yeah, I'm taking those out. Alright, finally time for the rods. So we're going to remove the rods. So I got to get the 12-point sockets. For this I'll do the front one, the last one, and I'll turn the crank. I'll do the next two. Alright, so that's what I'm doing next. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and loosen the connecting rods. Oof, that's tight. It was torqued to spec, and that is tight. I'm gonna have to get something stronger. Be right back. Alright, we're gonna try this again. Something a little bit bigger. There we go. Alright, so we'll start with the front one. Now to remove the caps, usually what I do is I try to grab the two bolts. Alright, just like that. And I try to pry them off. And then it's not coming out, so I'm just going to take the bolts out and then I'm going to bang down on the pistons. Up. Alright, so I want to see if I can get these out first without banging on the piston. So let me see if I can get some pry bars. Alright, we'll start first with this pry bar, see if I can loosen up the caps. You know what? I got an idea. I should have thought about it. I'm going to push the rod down with the nut, with the bolts. There we go. Alright, let's see. After the downward suction. So they have normal wear, so that means I get to reuse these. Ow, don't fall. Oop, almost scratched it, but nothing. Alright. Same thing. Only the protective coating is gone, but the bearing's good, so this will go back in. Alright. So I don't want the pistons to fall, so I'm going to try to do this slow. Alright. There is oil in the bottom of the piston, so lower bearing. For the top ring, looks pretty good too. Alright, and we'll put these back. There we go. Same thing, good bearings. Line it up. Hopefully the crank bearings look as good as these. Some of y'all may say, oh, those don't look good, but trust me, these are ACO bearings. They're not standard Honda bearings. There you go. Ah, come back. Now for those wondering, I got Comstar rods for the K20 and they're 5.472, and I got white scope pistons. Alright, they're pretty legit. Hopefully I don't have to get new piston rings for when I cut that block, because these are gapped specifically for my boost application, but we'll see how that plays out. But we'll clean these out before they go on the other motor. Alright, so the only thing left to get this apart is the bottom half of the block bolts and the crank journal bolts. I might just leave these for later. What I'm going to do, because I want to get to the machine shop and get things going, is grab the pistons, clean them up real quick, and the engine block with the text sheet, and go to the machine shop and get that going so they can hopefully get my engine done. I'm hoping this week so I can put it back together. And then once I inspect the bearings in here, we'll know if I need to order some, which I'll do today when I come back from machine shop, which I'll show you guys that. But we'll make sure the bearings are good. If they're not, I'll order a whole new set of ACL bearings. But if you can, these are closer, if you can see, the crank is perfect, all right, and it moves real freely, so it's perfect. Like, the way I built it is still perfect. It's just a sad thing that the engine cracked, because this engine was running freaking amazing. Now we gotta hopefully make the same thing that happened with this one on that one, except for the crack. We'll see how that goes. All right, be back in a few for y'all interesting. So this is my notebook where I wrote down most of my torque specs and sequences and stuff that I do with these engines, and I try to rewrite it in order of assembly. So as you can see, the first thing is going to be the old jet bolts, which are 12 foot-pounds or 144 inch-pounds. All right, so I'm going to go grab my torque wrench, set it up to 144 inch-pounds, and I'm going to install my old jet bolts and torque them down. I will begin by removing the 4 bolts I left when the machine shop wouldn't just have the parts separated. And we're going to install the 4 oil squirters. One thing I would suggest is that whenever you're doing reassembly, never skip a step. Like, oh, I'll tighten these or that later, because it will come back to haunt you. I once had to remove entire lower section just to torque down these specific bolts I'm putting back in right now. It was a rookie mistake of mine, but you get my point. So installation is very simple. You just gotta line up the old jet with the engine block. It has a hole where you put the old jet has a pin, and you just line those two up. So you see what I'm talking about? Thought about this pin right here and this hole. Alright, so you just put in a hole and then put the screw in. Bring them all the way down flush. Make sure that they're lined up, and continue with the next one. Alright, so like I said, make sure they're installed correctly, and then you'll bring out your torque wrench. I have mine set to 145 inch-pounds because I don't have one that will go to 144, and I need 144, so 145 will be just fine. So very simple. Tight, 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 and tight. Okay, moving along. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to install my bearings from the other engine. And yes, you don't want to do that. Typically you will get all new stuff and measure everything and mic everything out and make sure everything's in tolerance. Me, I'm going to send it, so you can judge me later. But the bearings that I have for this motor, they only come in 2 sizes. So they're either going to work or they're not going to work, and I expect them to work, so I'm not going to worry about it. If you were doing Honda bearings, then you use the numbers from the crank and the numbers from the block, which would be, you won't be able to see it too well, but they're right here. So this one is D, 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 C, D, and you take those digits right here and you match them with the numbers on the crank. In this case, the crank numbers are 33333. Alright, so you will take the codes D and 3 and you go look at the bearing sizing chart, and it will tell you the color of the bearing and or combination of bearings that you put together to put it on this journal and so forth. Me, I'm just gonna install the ACO bearings that came off the other engine block and continue on with assembly. Some people will say, well, you need to lube this first. Now I'm going to lube it when I put the crank on. And just like that. Alright, so bearings are installed. Now I'm going to install my truss bearings. Now to get them to stick and not fall, I'm going to use this engine lube assembly, and this will be the rear one. That will hold it in place for us. just like so. Right, and now I'm going to add some lube to the crank bearings so I can lay the crank down on it. The only good thing about me reusing all this stuff is that since everything is broken together, it will minimize my break-in period. Alright, one thing I want to do before I continue and forget, don't fall. Where's my lube? I'm going to lube also the outside side of the journals, journal bearings, because the initial startup dry is not going to be good for the motor. You want to make sure everything is a wear item. It's got some type of engine assembly lube. So many engine builders use grease. I use engine assembly lube. Okay. Make sure your alignment bearings are in place. I like to what you call eyeball it, go back and forward, and got minimal play and it's good. There's nothing I can do for that little bit of play, but last time I inspected it on the other block, it was within tolerance, the back and forward play, and that amount of play, it's not going to hurt anything. Alright, moving along. Okay, just like the other side of the engine, I'm going to grab these bearings and put them on the lower section of the girdle. Like I mentioned before, we're going to keep the same order in order to maintain the bearings matching with the crank. Alright, and just because I'm forgetful, I'm going to go ahead and lube them now in preparation to installing them on the engine, so that at least if I forget later on, it was already done. Just put it in the middle. Because later on when we get ready to put Honda bond on this, to put it on the engine block, we don't want to waste time and let the Honda bond dry up. Alright, next thing I'm going to do is install the rear main seal, but I will clean off the dried up grease on this section of the crank. Like I said, this is dried up grease from the factory seal. The factory seal comes lubed, and when you install it, you'll have grease on it, and some of it can dry up with heat. You can see that some of the grease still remains, so I'm not going to clean that off because that's the packing grease that comes with this seal, and I prefer to keep that lube in there because it helps the seal last longer. And the way I line this up, I don't slam it flat. I just make sure that the little groove on the back section, the concave area of the block, has the seal on it. See if I can show it. Hopefully you guys can see, but there's this little groove. I try to just eyeball it and make sure that this groove is even all the way around. That way when I install the other section, it holds it down properly. Okay, now we're ready to get this part installed. So we gotta do is use some Honda bond on the mating surface right here, and install it on the upper half. Hopefully this is not dried out. We'll see if we can get it open. There we go. I should have enough in this tube to do the lower section. So on those 4 edges, they got a little valley for the sealant. No, I'm sorry, not the sealant, but the handlebar, whatever you want to call it. RTV. You need to put some blobs on there, right? Then what we're going to do is that we're going to run the bead. I like to do it by hand. You don't want to take too long doing this because you don't want it to dry out before you install it to have a proper seal. Alright, so we're good to go. I'm gonna go ahead and get this installed. Just verification that I covered all the areas that I needed to, and now we're going to install it on the engine. Okay, so I just laid down the girdle on the block, and what I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna cinch this down just to start the to get the handle bond to be flush. This is not the torque that I've been doing. I'm just seating down the girdle to ensure that the handle bond is correctly seated. Alright, so reason I did this is because I was in a hurry. I had a phone call and I had to answer it, and this was drying out, but you know, making it flush. If you guys can see some of the handle bond squished out, which meaning that it's all the way through, came out through the outside. You can see those areas where you add those dabs, it pushed out the way it's supposed to, so that's properly sealed all the way around. Alright, and all the way to the back. Alright, so looking at everything, I see proper squish of the RTV. So now what I'm going to do next is I'm going to install all these bolts on the outside perimeter, and I'm going to get ready to do the actual torque sequence. So like I said, all I did tying this down is to flatten it out and get the initial sealing done on the engine block. Alright, so the initial torque sequence is going to be 22 foot-pounds on all of this, and then we're going to do 56 degrees. These are the factory crank main bolts. Alright, says that was a little too tight already. and loosen them up. Alright, so we start over. So we'll start with the torque sequence. So this is number 1. Number 2. Number 3. Number 4. Number 5. Number 6. Number 7. Number 8. Number 9. And number 10. And because I like to make sure, we're gonna go through it again. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Next thing we're going to do after the 22 foot-pounds is 56 degrees. So I have a setting here to do degrees. Alright, so we said it was 56 degrees. Now the degrees can only be done once, so you gotta make sure you maintain your 56, you maintain your sequence. That's why I call it out. So number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, number 6, number 7, number 8, number 9, and number 10. Alright, it's the following day, and today I'm going to be installing the rest of the timing assembly. So in order to install those components, you need to just place your chain in first, because once you install this rail right here, it's going to be hard to move the chain in place with the cam in the way. And the back one will just hang, but I will use that last to push it and then install the tensioner and put the bolts in. But I will show you guys how to line up the timing marks and install the timing chain components, tensioners, and guides. Alright, so let's get to it. Okay, so just like the timing for the oil pump, your timing chain will have marks. So you're going to be looking for the different color links. The 2 that are closest, well, I wouldn't say closest, the two, and the reason I say that is because there's another one down here, but these two links are going to go on the cams, and then the bottom link is going to obviously go on the crank pulley. All right. Now for lining up the marks, I'm gonna do a close-up right here. You have that little dot and the black link. You're gonna line that up. All right, and I line up this cam first because once I install this guide, it's gonna be hard for me to move the chain in place because this is gonna be pinched right here. All right, this one right here, that little dot, I'm gonna line up with that link. After I turn this one backwards, there's some spots back here where you can hold the cams in place. All right, and where they at? Oh, down here. So I'm gonna turn the cam, and that hole right there, I'm gonna put an Allen wrench to hold my cam to the closest position. All right. Another way that I've done it is that I'll use two wrenches, one here and one over here, and line the cams up, and then use a vice grip to hold the two wrenches together. All right. But I'm going to install something back here to hold the cams in place. Then I'm going to line up the cams, and on the bottom is, you have to be very careful not to mess it up. So you have that line right there, and when you follow it, there's a dot. I don't know if you can make it out, but there's a dot on this teeth. You need to line up this link to that tooth right there. All right, so you gotta be very careful because this is the part where you can mess up. So basically, you got that link, and you're gonna line it up with that tooth right there. All right, and then you line everything else up. All right, but for now, I'm going to go ahead and, well, you can say, pin the cams. All right, you probably won't be able to see too well back there, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab an Allen wrench and line up to the hole and put it there, push it all the way as far as it can to hold that cam in place. And there, now the cam is locked in place. And same thing with the other one. Another Allen wrench, and then, oops, do it from this side, right there, and now the cams will be locked in place for us to install the chain. Alright, so as mentioned, now I'm going to line up the links on the cam. So that's one, and that's two. So you're going to be a little off. Alright, this is why I prefer to use the two wrenches to lock everything in place. But the main thing is that you want to make sure is that your links are lined up with these two dots. Alright, so like I mentioned, because this one's going to be hard to move around, this one won't. You want to make sure that this link stays in its spot, and you're going to grab your guide. You're going to line it up. Right, so see what I mean? It's just pinching right there. So that's why you want to, at a minimum, have this link lined up when you get to this next step. And you're going to install those 3 screws. Just like so. And you guessed it, send it. Alright. Next thing I'm going to install is going to be the other side guide. Alright. So on the other side, you're just going to push the chain out of the way and get your specialty bolt, whatever, down, and then you're gonna lock it down. And just like before, you guessed it, I'm gonna send it the impact. Alright. There. Alright. So now what we're going to do, let's see, should be able to see it, but now we're going to line up the roller link with the tooth that's got the dot. So the black link is going to go on that tooth with the dot. Alright, so if it's a little off, just turn it, line it up, and give it right there. A little bit of tension just to make sure that from this top link to the bottom they're lined up. Alright, then what you're going to do is, if you press right here, your other link will line up. Let's see, let's get this. There we go. So I push this there just to get the top. There we go. So get that dot and that link to crush down on the cam, so it'll slide into the teeth just by pushing in like so. All right. So and now once I'm here, I'm gonna grab my tensioner with the 2 screws that hold it down. I'm going to bring it in. And as of right now, it seems to be off, so we can loosen this for now. We'll line this up again later. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to push this down and lock it down further. Alright, hopefully I can do it by hand. Sometimes you need a vise, but this should be fairly simple. So to push this back, because it'll lock out, what you want to do is hold this down and push in. Alright, so I'm going to hold this down and push in. Sometimes it's going to be hard because there's oil in here and it won't let it compress, especially since my oil had a little bit of nastiness of mixed oil with water. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to force it down with force to try to get it in as far as possible, and it should get that fluid out. Alright, and now I'm going to do it again. So you got to hold this down while you push down on it. And I recommend gloves because this can cut your hands. Alright, once you're down, you're going to grab your pin and you're going to come up slowly with it and push down, because there you go, you want to get it to the next link so it can slide up. So now the spring portion is further out. You can see the old gunky oil. When the engine's running, you're going to spit it out, and since I'm going to be doing the oil change anyways, I don't really care too much about the dirtiness. But back to that. Alright, so back to this. So making sure that my top link is still on the dot. We'll make sure the lower one is on the dot. And I'm going to move this link over like I did earlier to try to get it to line up the right way. So once again, I'm going to put pressure on it. I'm going to bring this in, and when I push this together, this will lock in place. It's fighting me a little. So what I'll do is I'll assist with the wrench. There we go. Alright, so now verify everything's lined up. Alright, now I'm going to once again grab my tensioner, line it up, and now the holes line up. So I will install the nuts, the bolts, whatever you want to call them. And you guessed it, I'm going to impact it in. and now you can pull that out. So one thing that I like to do here is give it more tension. So you already clicked once. I might try to do one more click. So that's what I'm going for. Where you at? Right there. So I want this to be in pretty good tension. Reason being is that some of these engines will tend to rattle, and 9 times out of 10 it is this because the spring inside of it goes weak and it doesn't lock. So you know, and then another thing that can cause this to rattle is this not having enough tension on this. So what I like to do is I like to put a little bit of extra tension on my chain. That way if it does rattle, I automatically know that it's going to be my VTC gear and not my timing tensioner. Alright, okay. Now, since we got all of that on, now we're going to install our top timing chain guide. Okay, for the top timing chain guide, all you're going to do is remove your 2 bolts. Inspect and clean, and put your bolts back in there. You have to torque these again, but I'm just going to bring them down. Alright, I'm going to set my torque and torque them down before I forget. Alright, so all I did was bring them down. Now we torque them right there and right there. Okay, next thing I'm going to be installing is the reluctor wheel. You need to make sure you install this correctly. It says outside right here, alright, and it says nothing on the back. So you want to make sure that this faces the engine and this faces the timing chain cover. So you'll remove, well, I like to keep my bottom so I can spin the assembly if I need to. Alright, and before installing this, what I like to do is making sure that everything's lined up. So you got the dot and the link, and then you're gonna have your link covered with that one tooth is gonna be covered, but right here's the line right behind it. You just want to make sure that that link is lined up with that tooth, and then you're just gonna freaking install this right here, just like so, and boom. Now we can continue to assemble stuff, but because I don't want that to get lost, I will install this bolt back on here, which will be removed when I install the front cover. And there it is. Got some attack helicopters flying by. Cool. Anyways, so next thing you gotta do is prep your front cover. Alright, since everything that I've installed in there so far was already clean and whatever, now I have to clean this. Alright, that's why I didn't like show any of the cleaning of like the middle sections and that, but I don't have to show that. It's very simple. So all I'm gonna do is grab some razor blades. I'm gonna get rid of all these old RTV, all of this stuff, right? And then I'm gonna clean all the excess because I don't want none of this old stuff to fall off inside of the engine because it's been already, you know, separated. This can with time fall out and then go into your oil pump pickup tube. You don't want that. So I'm gonna clean all of that up, and just so you know where the RTV or the Honda bond goes, is gonna be all on this edge, around the VTC access port. You're gonna put a dab here, 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 and here. All of these spots that I mentioned with they have Honda bond are by the Honda manual. All right, and another thing you want to make sure is that this seal right here It's not flat. Mine, you can still feel that it's, you know, lifted, because like I said, everything else in here was already new anyways. So I'm not going to be replacing this neither. So all I'm going to do is clean this up, get it ready, Honda bond it, and then install it into the engine. Next step. Alright, so like I mentioned, I used a razor blade to remove all of the RTV that was on here. I haven't applied Honda bond yet because I'm explaining this, I don't want it to be drying. Another thing that I like to do is I use drill bits that fit the hole, and just by hand push them in and out to get all the RTV out of these holes. Alright, because the last thing you want is to push RTV into these holes. So another thing that I also like to do is inspect each hole. Like the ones that push through, I don't really care too much about. But the ones that come to a dead stop, like that one or this one or this one and all of these right here, except for that one right there, you want to inspect inside of them to make sure that there's no RTV in there. If there is RTV in there, what you can do is grab yourself one of these, but they can fit in there. This one won't because it's bent, but you know, you can scrape in there and break it free. And then once you break it free, you can grab an air nozzle like this one with an air compressor, and all you would do is put this at an angle right here and spray, and it will spit out the RTV that's in there. The reason that you don't want RTV in there is simply because if there's RTV in there, you didn't clean it out, you will cause this. I don't know if you guys can see it, but this crack right here is from RTV being in the hole. Alright, that happened when I was reassembling the engine. After I noticed that it had a crack on it, I didn't care. I just wanted to put it back together to get back home. So I didn't clean these holes, and yet and behold, yep, it cracked. Alright, but this block was damaged anyway, so I didn't care for cleaning it. But this one, since it's going to be the one in the car, make sure that there's nothing into these holes. Now, before you install that on here, you got to grab a razor blade or your nail, whatever, and just remove the RTV here. Alright, you don't want that there because it will prevent you from having a good seal. Alright, but yeah, you can do it with a razor blade, or if you got nails like I do, my nails grow and they don't break, so I have to cut them all the time. But you know, just clean those sections and get ready for insertion. So right now what I'm going to do, I'm going to prep that, put Honda bond on it, bring it over with the nut, with the hardware, and tighten it down. And yes, with that. Alright, so I talked about prepping that and how to prep that. I'm about to put RTV on that, or Honda bond, whatever you want to call it. But another thing I like to do, I like to prep my hardware. So I have the VTC solenoid with the bolt that holds it in place, all the hardware for the cover, and the two guiding bolts. That way when I come over, I can just grab them, insert them. I will do those two first. That way the plate is lined up on the engine block, and then I'll put all the rest of the nuts and bolts, the bolts in there. Alright, like I mentioned before, you want to make sure you remove the RTV on the ends of these, simply because you know, you don't want no buildup, and you don't want to be pushing more RTV into those holes and eventually in the future crack it. You want to have everything clean to have just the minimal amount of Honda bond into these holes, because you don't want to crack your block. Alright, I'm gonna get the front cover prepped to install. Alright, here we go. So the cover has Honda bond, and now we're going to install it. So you might hit this spot right here and right here, right? So you just want to try to bring it in as close and straight as possible, so that you don't just spread crud everywhere. But I line the two tops and I bring it down flush. Now I grab my two alignment bolts on the bottom and get them started. Once they are in, alright, now we'll grab all these screws and place them in the holes. All of these are the same size, so you don't have to worry about it. Alright, and the last three go on the oil pan at the bottom. Okay. Now we're going to install, oh, I forgot one. Now we're going to install the VTC solenoid. Just a quick inspection. Still clean, seals there. What I like to do is I line up the hole with the thing, and once it's flush, push it in, line it up, and just like everything else, impact it. Alright, and that's the front cover. I will install my front motor mount. Those are, I think, 33 foot-pounds, so I'm gonna line that up. Alright, just like every other bolt, I have removed the RTB from these because you don't want to build up the any RTB inside those holes. There's some that go all the way through, but some that don't. So I'm gonna grab my triangle mount, put my bolts in there. Again, get some of these started so it doesn't fall. And we're gonna bring it down. Like that. Okay, and now I'm gonna grab the torque wrench, verify the torque spec, and torque these down. You do not want these to come loose because this will crack, it will break there. Like you don't want this to be loose. Alright, the torque spec is 33 foot-pounds. I'm going 34 just to make sure I go a little bit over. Okay, the next thing I'm going to be installing is going to be my water pump housing. As you guys remember, that housing is in the ground back there. It's completely assembled, so all I'm going to do, this is already clean, so I don't have to clean this up. But I'm going to clean the actual water pump housing. It shouldn't have too much RTV on it because I use just the right amount, but I will clean the surfaces and get it ready to get installed. And just like everything else, you inspect your seals, and this one is not flush, so that means that it's going to make a good seal once I tighten it down. So I'm going to clean this up and get it ready. Alright, cleaned it up and did the lineup of RTV. Now I'm going to slide it on here. I got my hardware right here ready to go. So let's go after it. And installed. Alright, so now one thing I will say, I always recommend replacing your thermostat every time this assembly goes dry, because somehow I noticed that these things like to get stuck if they've been dry after they're being used. I won't take my chance with it. If I have problems burping it and getting it to open and close, because I'll be able to tell with my some data logging, my primary head engine coolant temperature versus the radiator. Once I start it, I'll be logging that and seeing if the temperature goes up and down like it's supposed to, and if it gets too hot on one side and not hot on the other, that tells me that it's not opening. By the way, all right, moving over, gonna go ahead and get ready to do the oil cooler. So for my oil cooler, the first thing I gotta do is I need to transfer this from the other block to here. I'm gonna install my oil pressure sensor, the cap, the fitting for this line, which it should be, actually this goes to the cooler itself. You'll see once I'm putting it together, but and then make sure this is clean. Installed my my oil cooler and oil filter and go from there. But before I do all of that, I'll grab it, which is right here, and I'm gonna try to get as much oil I can out of it. And once I have that clean and ready to go, I'll go ahead and start reassembly. All right, preparation for installation of the oil cooler is how I do it. All right, so I cleaned it the best I could, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to put some brake parts lubricant. The reason I use brake parts lubricant is because it doesn't affect the integrity of the seal, it doesn't swell it up, it doesn't damage it. And the main purpose of it, I wanted to stay put, and I also wanted to have a better seal and not go bad. This seal is still higher than the rest of the assembly, so it will seal properly. Here's the bolt to tighten it, and I will also use that same stuff on here. As you can see, I used it last time and on these things, and these seals are still perfect. They didn't swell up, they didn't get damaged, and all of this is clean. All right, so I'm going to lube these two O-rings with this brake parts cleaner, and I used this wire brush to clean all the old RTV off of this. And when I install this, I'm going to put Honda bond on these threads, and I'm going to screw it in. And once it gets to the point where the clip is going to be at the top, so I can remove it from the wire harness easier, all right, I will get it to where it's snug and tight at that top position. Reason being is if you screwed it, this is a 1/8 NPT, and if you pay attention, it gets bigger as it goes in, and the last thing you want is to crack your block right where your oil sensor goes. So like I said, I'm going to screw this in by hand, and once I cannot turn it in by hand anymore, then I'm going to turn it to where this is facing up, so I can have an easy way to remove it when I'm messing with the engine, if I got to take the harness off, and not break this or the harness or the engine block by doing it this way. The Honda bond is going to seal it, so there's no need to torque this down. Like I said, hand tight, and then line it up to the top position so that you can undo the wire harness. That's all I'm going to do with this. Do not over tighten this. If you over tighten this, you will crack your freaking port. All right, and like I said, just for preventive measures, I'm going to use this lubricant on these seals and then install all these parts. So I'm going to lube this and get it ready to install. Okay, as mentioned, I'm going to put Honda bond on the threads. All right, and all I'm going to do is just screw it in by hand until it's hard to turn by hand. You can see it's hard, so now I'm going to tighten it with the connection facing upward. Alright, it's feeling already tight, so I'm going to be careful not to break it. But like I said, that right there is perfect. It's facing up, so when I plug in the connector, I can push down at the top. Alright, and if you over tighten this, you will split this little section right here, and then you'll have a leak forever. You have a cracked block that, I mean, it could be repaired by a professional, but you don't want to break that. Okay, now I'm going to install my oil cooler. So like I mentioned, I put some of that brake parts lubricant on that O-ring and this one over here, and the main purpose is so it doesn't fall and doesn't get crushed the wrong way. Alright, so let's see, this out of the way. Alright, so for installation on this little metal part is gonna hit the engine right there. Alright, so that's what you're looking for to be on the left side of this area right there. And then when you tighten it down, that will hold it in place. And then this one right here, since it's got lube, it's gonna slide nice and smooth into that port. And now I'm going to install the screw. All right. Now this hose. And the clamp. And you're gonna see marks on your hose. I like to keep the marks and the hose on the same position to prevent leaks. There it is. Now I'm going to get the torque spec for this. I can find it real quick, and then I'll tighten it, and I'll show you that once I get it. Alright, according to the book that I found, this pipe is 36 foot-pounds, so we're going to go to 36. That's all she wrote. Yeah, that's more than enough. I'm not going to over tighten. I don't want to crack it. Alright, and this one, if I'm not mistaken, it said 25 foot-pounds. So I'll verify, and I'm going to replace that one from the other block. Oh, the book said 25 foot-pounds, so that's what we're going to tighten it to. Usually you want to replace this crush washer, but I don't have any on hand, so I'm just going to send it. If I ever see it leaking any coolant, then I'll go buy a new crush washer and install it. Right. 25 foot-pounds. Doesn't seem like a lot, but if it's leaking, I'll tighten it a little bit more, and if it continues to leak, I'll put a new one on it. Now, as far as the oil filter, I will install that at the end, because when I install this, usually the header will start hitting it, and I don't want to damage the oil filter. So I will install that once the engine is installed, the oil filter once the engine is installed in the engine. All right. So moving along, just quick checks. I still need to install my crank, which I'll do after I do the oil pan. Gotta install my valve cover. Let's see, in the front, I will install my knock sensor. Is going to be installed after I install the starter. We know that thing can break real easily. I will install this next, and there's a screw here. I will tighten that as well, and there's a bracket for this right here. I will also install that. So, and this I'll leave open because I use this hole to bleed the air out of the system when I'm adding coolant. So I'm going to tighten up these hoses, these brackets, and I will do the valve cover next after that. Okay, I'm going to start with this hose. Loosen the clamp. Now let's see how I tied it last time. Looks like I may have, you know what, because this is a pain to remove, I'm going to add some of this lubricant. Like I said, I like to use this stuff for the brake parts because it doesn't affect the rubber, or it doesn't swell it up, and it lubricates it, so it doesn't hurt anything here, even though it's for brakes. My only concern is if I need to tighten it, I need to be able to reach into it because I'm going to have the supercharger manifold on the way. So I'll probably just going to place it down here. So that's a quick tech tip for most of y'all. If you're working on anything, whatever you're installing, make sure you have access to get to it after the fact. Because if I tighten it back up here and then my manifold's on the way and it's leaking, I cannot get from the top to it. So I can reach from the bottom, the front of the engine, and get to this screw and tighten it. You do not want to over tighten it. So once you feel that it's tight and you see that it's crushing down, that's more than enough. Okay. So now this pipe, so what I gotta do is I need to remove this 12 mil. Alright, and this 10 mil. And first I'm going to do is line the top. Get the bolt started. That way this lower one over here I can just push into position, and now that everything is set up, I can tighten it. I sent it. The reason it was a little tight was because this pipe is hitting this engine hoist bracket, but it'll be fine. Alright, good to go. And now we will prep to do the oil pan, the valve cover. Alright, so the preparation that I'm going to do to install the valve cover is to remove the excess RTV from this point right here, so I will clean that off with a razor blade in the front and the back. Same thing right here from the front cover and over here. And obviously when I install the valve cover with the gasket, I will place RTV in those same spots to prevent leaking. Alright, so I'm just gonna use a razor blade to clean these four corners down and get my valve cover out from wherever I placed it and get it ready to install. When you're doing this, you always want to use the razor blade going outward. Alright, you don't want to drop old RTV back into the engine. Now this back one over here can be a pain because you have this bracket on the way. So just be careful when doing this, not to scratch, and like I said, not to allow the old dried up RTV to go into the engine. Alright, so now all four corners are ready. So all I'm going to do is swipe and clean, just in case there's any oil there, because you don't want these spots to not seal properly, because you'll have oil leaking from there. Alright, what to look for on the valve cover. So you want to make sure that your gasket is not hard like plastic, it's malleable. Same thing with the tubes. Make sure that they're not broken or ripped. Make sure that they're not hard. Alright, this, like I mentioned before, this crap is new, so I won't be replacing it. And if you got excess RTV, try to remove it, because you're gonna put RTV on here again, and it's gonna seal, so it doesn't matter. And there's my hardware and coils, which I will be reinstalling. So without further ado, I'm gonna go ahead and add the RTV to the block, drop the valve cover on it and all the fasteners, and bolt it down. Okay, so what you want to do is to place the Honda bond on the places where two sections meet. So basically this front cover and the block, you want to put a dab right there. right on it, just like that. Doesn't matter if you use a little bit too much, it'll be fine. And then same thing with the section on the back where the cam tower assembly and the head meet, right in that corner right there. And in the back, same thing. Last but not least, the one right here in the back, which you probably can't see, but you guys get the point. Now I bring the valve cover, line it up on the studs and on the tubes, and push it down. Sometimes it won't slide down, so what you gotta do, you gotta bring the rubber seals around the tubes, pushing down, because if you force it down, you are going to crack them, damage them. You don't want that. So work it around down the tube. Improper installation of these rubber seals, especially when they're new like mine are, they're pretty malleable, will cause you to have oil inside your spark plug tube. So there you go. Always recheck them. And now it's almost down, so we'll go ahead and install the seals. Install the nuts. And no, I will not use the impact for this. If you guys have done this before, you guys know that you can easily break these and strip them. So the way that I do them, I bring it down, and there's going to be a point where it stops. When it stops, quit turning. It's tight. It's tight. And recheck and make sure that your tubes are not crushing your seals. Mine are still good, so continue. Like I said, once they stop, there's no need to continue tightening, because you have already bottomed out and you already got enough tension on the rubber to the top that these are not going to come loose. It's a big mistake I see people with these seals, is that they keep tightening and then they'll snap the bolt or snap the stud. Next thing you know, or even strip the nuts. The next thing you know, they're on the interweb asking, how can I fix this? Well, this is how you prevent it. Alright? I said, I just make sure it's tight and I keep moving on. Like I mentioned, they will bottom out and they're good to go. Now my my ignition coils. And the hardware. And these will be installed after the wire harness is installed, so keep these out of the way. Now, some people might recommend to use Loctite, especially on these ones right here, so that you don't lose the nut with the valve cover. I mean with the coil cover assembly. I just tighten them by hand, and if they come out, if the nut comes out with them, I'll just do what you guys said in the beginning, where I used a wrench to remove them off. There's no need to use Loctite in here. Alright. A real quick thing that I'll be installing back here in these two bolts is going to be this heat shield. So these are self-explanatory. Okay. Always, no matter what, make sure that everything goes in by hand smoothly before you apply force. Alright, and now that is ready. As you see right here, this is where the header is going to hit when I'm installing it. You see all those scratches. But like I said, I don't want to damage my oil filter, poke a hole in it by mistake or anything. Alright, I believe we are ready to install the oil pan. Now, because of this assembly right here, I'm gonna flip the engine upside down, but I need to make sure that this doesn't hit this. So I will turn it that way, but be cognizant of this right here. You don't want to loosen this and then have your engine come over and slam and hit this and crack all of this, all right? Or worst case scenario, your head. All right, so it's gonna be pretty hard, heavy to spin it, but I'll spin it slowly, and I'll put the pin in so I can work in the bottom with the engine upside down. Okay, so you guys seen part 1. This is currently part 2. This is the end of part 2. I had an issue with my computer, so if you guys got this far, you have noticed that the installation of the head is not on the video. What happened was that as I've been adding clips to the computer, since my computer is like, my hard drive is almost too full, every time I add a clip to the main video, I will delete the old clip. Well, that's what I've been doing as I'm making the new video. So what happened was my editing software, well, my computer froze, and when I tried to get the computer back to work, it was just frozen and stuck. It wasn't doing anything, so I couldn't like do anything other than hard restart the computer. When I did that, hoping that the save that I had on the computer was maintained, it did not. So I lost the original clip that I edited and all the footage that I used to make the video. So I spent a couple hours recovering those files, and I was able to get most of it back. So what you guys saw is the files that I was able to recover, but I'm missing the head installation, the cam and rocker assembly installation, and a couple little things that I discussed on the installation of those components. But basically, to install the head, you just put the head gasket on, you install the head on it. I installed my I got inline pro head studs into the block. And then obviously I put the hardware on and I torqued it down. Once I torqued all that down, then I installed the cam and rocker assembly. And same thing with that, I torqued that system down, and that's most of the stuff that I missed out. Recording that again is going to be painful because obviously I don't have the engine apart, and I don't know when I'll have the next one. But in the future, when I get an engine that I'm working on, I'll go over those specific steps and post a video, and you guys can see it in the future. If you're ever working on this and you want to like, oh, how do I do this part specifically, then eventually there will be a video available. But for right now, I'm just going to continue on with the videos I was able to recover, and hopefully I can give you guys a good product. So that's the end of part 2. I should be, once this video is rendering, then I'll be uploading it so that you guys can watch it. And once that is uploaded, then I'll start on, hopefully part 3 should be the last section. Looking at the amount of clips and time, it should be the last section. There's a little things I need to record to go over it, and at that point I should be including that in part 3. But for now, I hope you guys like so far what you guys have been watching, and I hope you guys get some good information out of this. So with that being said, peace.